Up next for Cincinnati, non-conference game. Bearcats are at Miami of Florida. Noon Eastern Time start. The game will be televised on ACC regional networks. Coach, thanks so much for joining us on the call today. If you would take a minute to tie up the game against Memphis, and then tell us what you expect to see as you go back out of conference and face Miami, please.
Yeah, now we've got to regroup after Memphis. Memphis put a pretty good whipping on us, and we're just trying to find something positive for our football team. Working towards this week's game against Miami. I think they were one of the better teams I've seen on film. Of course, we played Ohio State, so got our work cut out for us.
Take questions for Coach Tuberville, please. Star 1 on your telephone to join the queue. The operator will introduce you.
And we'll go to Dan Tortora with Dan Tortora Broadcast Media.
Hi, Coach. How you doing today? Coach, can you hear me?
Good morning.
How are you doing today? I wanted to obviously go into this game against Miami and what you got coming up and what you've seen from the Hurricanes and what they've been able to put together this season going into a matchup like this. Really some of those key areas that you've looked at heading into the matchup.
Well, you know, it's a typical Miami team, a lot of speed, quickness, young quarterback. And that's where he struggled a little bit this year, but he's gotten better and better each game. After the opening game against Louisville, he's got a lot of targets to go to. They're very quick on both sides of the ball.
Then as far as your unit and what you've been able to put together, obviously you started out 2-0 and then lost 2 games, you know, Ohio State and Memphis. What did you take away from Ohio State and Memphis that you can bring into Miami? Offense, defense, special teams, some of those key components that you're bringing into practice moving forward that you really wanted to improve on after seeing those 2 losses, and not only losses but big losses as far as points-wise?
Yeah, we didn't find much positive about either one of those games. We scored a couple of touchdowns on some long passes against Ohio State. That's pretty much all we got out of that game. Last week we didn't do very much. You know, offense, defense, our special teams, we got beaten all 3 phases. So we just got to regroup and try to find something that'll work on both sides of the ball. We've had some injuries, but other than that, we're just trying to.
And we'll go next to Tom Groshen with Cincinnati Enquirer.
Hey, Coach, do you have any updates on Gunner and Jose Williams? And also, could you talk about your time spent when you were at Miami, what that was like as an assistant down there, the glory years, I guess?
Yeah, had a great time at Miami. Still got a lot of friends down there. Got some guys coaching on the coaching staff that I work with. Great high school football. A lot of talent down there in that area. We've got quite a few on our team from South Florida. But fond memories of a lot of great games and a lot of players that I coached down there, keep in contact with. Injury-wise, still don't have any update today. We get an injury update on Monday nights from our trainer. Most of the guys that are injured will stay in the training room most of the day if they don't have class. So we'll have more of an idea tomorrow of our press conference about all of our injured players.
Coach, could you expand just a little bit on also, thanks for the injury update, but when you were at Miami, it was such a standout time in college football. That was a talented team, and there was a lot of exuberant behavior, shall we say, that's been well written about. What was it like to be around that?
You know, I think a lot of that was overblown. A lot of people, resented the University of Miami back in the 80s and 90s because it won a lot of games. Nobody very seldom beat the Hurricanes back then, and there was a lot of show of confidence from some of the players, but it quieted down as they started putting in new rules about celebration and all those things. But I tell you, the only thing I can remember about those players was about their work ethic, about how hard they worked. Graduated and had good football teams. And, there was a lot talked about the celebration, and there was a little bit of it overdone. But overall, excellent kids, very good football players, and they did a lot for college football back in the 80s and 90s.
Thanks.
We'll go next to Tim Reynolds with Associated Press.
Tommy, good afternoon. The last gentleman asked most of what I was going to ask, but I was just curious, just if you could follow up on one point about your time at Miami. I'm sure you followed, the program, and obviously, the last decade has not been like any of the previous three for Miami for a lot of reasons. Can you put your finger? I know you're concerned with your own team, but can you put your finger on any reasons as to why Miami seems to have fallen so far so fast from that 0-1, 0-2 run?
It was hard for Miami to keep that going. Many years is what it kept going, even all the way through the 90s and early 2000s. It was just so hard. And I think one thing that happened is just the tearing down of the old Orange Bowl, which meant so much traditionally to that football team. It's hard not to have your own stadium, and that was claimed as Miami's Hurricane Stadium back, even though the Dolphins played there. Now they can go to a different place. I'm not coaching against Miami since I've been coaching the last 21 years, but they still had good football teams. Coach Golan inherited a program that had gone down some, but he's built it back. And he's done it with mostly players from South Florida, which is what that program was built on back in the early 80s. So it's hard to sustain the success that was there in the 90s and 80s, and it was unheard of about what they did, and came from nowhere, because almost in the early 80s there was even talk about dropping the football program, and going from that point to winning all the national championships and have all the great players. Just a phenomenal run. And I can see them coming back. They've gotten better. I know they've lost a few games this year, but the talent's getting better and better over the last few years, and I think they're going to be a team to reckon with nationally in college football for years to come.
And we'll go next to Gary Smith with the New Orleans Advocate.
Hi, Coach. With the obvious exception of East Carolina, the conference hadn't had a lot of success this year out of conference. Are you surprised by that? Obviously, when you're playing the Power 5 conferences, usually those games are on the road, which makes it tougher. But where do you see the conference standings at this point?
I hadn't seen a lot of the other games. I know, some teams have played very close games and lost. But it's hard for me to talk about other teams. I know we've played 3 non-conference games and lost one of them against a very good team in Ohio State. So I think overall, over year in year out, we'll be able to hold our own. As anybody is going to struggle, I don't care if we're in a Power 5 or whatever you call the ones that we're in. It's just going to be year in and year out who has the better teams.
East Carolina is the only team from a non-power, so-called Power 5 conference that's ranked. How much do you think that helps the conference just in terms of publicity?
Well, it'll change every year. East Carolina's got a good football team, very good football team, and I think somebody else will move up in there as the year goes on. I don't think it really means a lot who's up there right now. You're going to start seeing a lot of people fall out of the top 25 that's in there right now, and probably might have been in there all year long because competition gets tougher. But I think this is going to be a very interesting year in college football with a playoff and with a lot of teams that are going to beat each other up in some of these so-called Power 5 conferences, and then see who gets the vote at the end of the year.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll go next to Joey Johnston with Tampa Tribune.
Tommy, you were just mentioning about how Miami hasn't been able to maintain that standard in the 80s and 90s. Have the dynamics changed in college football to the point where it's difficult for anybody to do that, Miami or anybody, to have that kind of run ever again?
Yeah, that's going to be very hard to do. And we were fortunate when I was there in the earlier years in the 80s that we were independent. And we pretty much played who we wanted. We played good football teams because nobody wanted to play us, and we had to go on the road a lot and play games. I remember playing Michigan, and Michigan would not come to the Orange Bowl and play. And so then we got into the Big East, and things got a little bit better schedule-wise, which helped out. And now in the ACC, it's pretty important that you get in a conference now that especially for teams like Miami, because, again, it's very hard to get a schedule. I can remember Sam Jankovic and Jimmy Johnson struggling to get people to play us. You know, Florida dropped us, and Florida State was the only one that kind of hung in there and kept a commitment. And so it was hard to get people to come to South Florida, and we had to travel all over the country and play. But you know, I've noticed this year, you know, Miami's gone to Louisville to play, which obviously is a conference game. We went to Nebraska and played. The thing about University of Miami is they've never backed down from playing good football schedules. They've gone and played and competed each year, and this is again another one of those years where they've scheduled a lot. We have Miami coming up to play us here next year, which we're very fortunate to get them to come up and play. So it's been fun to watch Miami over the years. Again, everybody's going to have up and down years. Everybody's going to struggle because of certain situations, but Miami's got they've got some obstacles always in front of them, just because it's a private school, and you know, you travel so far to play your home games. But I tell you, they've held their own for most part. And again, as I said, Coach Goldens has really brought a lot back to the South Florida people, because he's recruited a lot of South Florida players when I think some coaches got away from that.
Coach, thank you for your time today. We look forward to talking to you again next Monday.